I wanted to say a little bit about the upcoming videos here in this week's session. We're looking at missions in the Reformation, and in some ways there's not as much to really be talking about because there's not the extensive amount of missions among Protestants this time like there is among Catholics. And part of the time period we're looking at, we talked about last week with Catholic missions and colonization. But there are a couple things to think about related to this time period, as well as to set the stage for later Protestant missions. So a couple sessions here to talk about. First, I've had another video from Professor Reeves, and this one focusing on kind of a brief overview of the Reformation time period, some concepts, probably a reminder of some things that we talked about in Survey of Church History, as well as some new things that I think are important to know. Then I have a section that is biographical introduction to the Reformers. This is from Survey of Church History, so in many respects this will just be a review, so it might not be something that you would necessarily need to take notes on, but just kind of, you can submit your notes from Survey of Church History, but I either want you to watch the videos or review your notes so you have that background biographical information kind of fresh in your memory. Then I'll have a video specifically on mission activity, or maybe it'd be better to say evangelism. Both of those terms can be used interchangeably, I think, but there's a slight difference here with what we're talking about during the Reformation period from the Protestants. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the things related to evangelism and missions. And then the last video for this session, in preparation for the midterm, is a lecture or sermon that I came across from a missionary to the Ukraine, a Baptist missionary to the Ukraine, talking about this time period and some of the things that he sees as being important for how the Reformation shaped missions. I don't want you necessarily to take notes on this video to submit. Instead, I wanted to offer this as a different perspective, as well as kind of we're looking at it, I'm approaching at it from an academic standpoint, he approaching it from a missional standpoint. So there'll be some overlap, some similarities, some similar types of material, but then also I think there's some important things to think about from the perspective he's coming from as being a missionary on the ground, in the field, from that standpoint. And some of the things he'll talk about are certainly historical, but then some of those things will also relate to some larger questions within missions and missions theory in general. So I wanted to include that. Again, it's not so much to take notes on, so it's not something that you absolutely have to have done before the midterm, but I thought it would be a good perspective that as you have time to go back through and reflect on some of these things related to contemporary missions. And so that's kind of how we're going to go as we get to the point of finishing up here prior to the midterm.